Part 1. The hegemony had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had conquered 17 species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, and they had done it all without ever losing a war. Their method was simple and elegant, perfected over countless generations of conquest. They studied their enemies. They found the weakness that every living creature possessed. Then they exploited it until their enemies could not fight anymore. Every species in the known galaxy had what they called a shutdown trigger. It was a biological limit, a point at which the body simply refused to continue. They entered a deep sleep after 16 hours of activity, and nothing could wake them until their bodies had recovered. The mighty berserkers, who stood 3 meters tall and could tear through metal with their bare hands, became docile and passive when exposed to certain chemical combinations. Even the silicon-based, who did not breathe or eat like organic life, had thermal limits that forced their crystalline minds into emergency hibernation. They had built their entire military doctrine around this simple truth: find the shutdown trigger, exploit it, win. High Commander had overseen the conquest of 4 species in his long career. He was considered one of the finest military minds the hegemony had ever produced. When the human colony ship stumbled into space and refused to submit to immediate inspection, he approached the situation with the same clinical confidence he had always possessed. The ship was captured easily enough. The humans aboard were strange creatures, soft and fragile-looking, with only 2 arms and 2 legs and no natural armor or weapons to speak of. They died easily when shot. They screamed when injured. Their bodies were filled with water and soft tissues that seemed almost designed to fail. The xenobiology team studied the captured humans for 3 standard cycles. They mapped every aspect of human biology, from the rhythm of their hearts to the chemical composition of their blood. They documented the human sleep cycle, noting that humans required approximately 8 hours of unconsciousness out of every 24 to function properly. They studied the human stress response, the flood of chemicals that humans called adrenaline, and the way it affected their behavior. After 3 cycles, the xenobiology team delivered their report to High Commander. The humans had a shutdown trigger, just like every other species. After approximately 40 hours without sleep, human cognitive function degraded significantly. After 60 hours, they began to hallucinate. After 80 hours, they became non-functional. The solution was simple: sustain combat operations for 40 hours and the humans would collapse. High Commander ordered the invasion of the human colony world they called New Brisbane. He committed 3 legions to the operation, approximately 90,000 soldiers. The humans had a population of 200,000, with perhaps 10,000 capable of fighting. The mathematics were clear. This would be a simple conquest. The invasion began at dawn local time, descended through the atmosphere like falling stars, disgorging soldiers into the fields and forests surrounding the main human settlement. The humans responded with surprising speed, organizing their defenders and establishing defensive positions with efficiency that impressed even. But they were patient. They pressed the attack constantly, rotating fresh units into combat while exhausted units to rest. This was the standard doctrine: maintain constant pressure, deny the enemy any chance to recover, wait for the shutdown trigger to activate. The first 40 hours passed. The humans were still fighting. High Commander was not concerned. Biological limits varied among individuals. Perhaps some humans could last longer than the average. The pressure would be maintained. 50 hours passed. The humans were still fighting. 60 hours. The humans had begun to rotate their defenders, some collapsing into sleep in sheltered positions while others held the line. But there were not enough of them to maintain proper rotations. Many defenders had been awake for the entire duration of the battle. Ordered his intelligence officers to focus their surveillance equipment on the human defenders. What he saw confused him deeply. A human soldier who had been awake for 62 hours was crouched behind a barrier, firing a weapon at positions. She had a wound on her arm that had been crudely bandaged. Her eyes were red and hollow. Her hands were shaking. And she was singing. Did not understand the words, but the melody was unmistakable. This human, who should have collapsed from exhaustion hours ago, was singing a song while she fought. 70 hours passed. The humans were still fighting. High Commander summoned his xenobiology team. He demanded an explanation. The lead, a nervous creature named, reviewed the data with trembling appendages. The humans were indeed suffering from extreme exhaustion. Their cognitive function was degraded. Their reaction times had slowed. Their aim was less accurate. But they were still fighting. How? Demanded. Your report indicated shutdown at 40 hours. His response changed everything. High Commander, the said, I must revise our initial assessment. Humans do not have a mandatory shutdown. They possess the biological mechanisms for one, but they appear to have developed the ability to override it. Override it? How? Through force of will, High Commander. They simply choose not to stop. Stared at the for a long moment. That is not possible. No biological organism can override its own shutdown triggers through choice. Humans can. Their bodies produce chemicals that temporarily suppress the need for sleep and accelerate their stress response. This allows them to continue functioning long past their normal limits. The process is extremely damaging to their bodies. Extended use causes organ failure, cognitive damage, and shortened, but they do it anyway. On the display screens, a human soldier who had lost his right arm at the elbow was using his remaining hand to reload a weapon. He had been awake for 73 hours. His face was pale from blood loss. He should have been dead. He was not dead. He was fighting. 90 hours passed. The humans were still fighting. By now, they were beginning to struggle. Their own soldiers required 4 hours of mandatory rest every 30 hours, a biological imperative that could not be. The constant rotation of units was taxing their logistics. Casualties were mounting as exhausted human defenders, who should have been easy targets, continued to resist with desperate fury. Watched a recording that had been flagged by his intelligence officers as significant. A human soldier had taken a position in a ruined building. He had been wounded twice, once in the leg and once in the side. He had run out of ammunition for his primary weapon and had resorted to using a sharpened piece of metal as a club. A squad of soldiers entered the building to eliminate him. The human killed 4 of them before the remaining soldiers brought him down. He had been awake for 89 hours. His wounds should have rendered him unconscious from pain alone. Instead, he had fought until his heart stopped. The xenobiology team delivered a supplementary report. Human history, retrieved from captured data systems, revealed patterns that understanding. Humans had fought wars against each other for their entire existence as a species. They had fought wars that lasted for decades. They had fought wars that lasted for generations. They had fought a war that lasted for 100 years over territory. They had fought a war that lasted for 300 years over religious disagreements. In one conflict, a human military unit had continued fighting for 30 years after the war had officially ended, because they had not received word of the surrender and refused to believe it when locals tried to tell them. In another incident, a single human soldier had held a position against overwhelming enemy forces for an entire day, long after he had run out of ammunition, simply by pretending he was still armed and capable of fighting. Humans did not just fight to win. They fought because fighting was what they did. They fought when victory was impossible. They fought when death was certain. They fought out of duty, out of love, out of hatred, and out of a concept that had no translation in the language, something humans called spite. High Commander read these reports with growing unease. 100 hours had passed. The invasion was stalling. Human casualties were high, but so were casualties, and the humans showed no signs of stopping. A new recording arrived. A human woman had been captured by soldiers and was being interrogated about the colony's defensive positions. She had been awake for 96 hours. She was wounded in multiple places. She was clearly terrified. The interrogator, using translation software, asked her why the humans continued to fight when the situation was clearly hopeless. The woman looked at the interrogator with red-rimmed eyes. Her voice was hoarse. Her hands were shaking. "Because you want us to stop," she said, "and we do not give you what you want." The recording ended. High Commander sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the battle for New Brisbane continued. 110 hours had passed. The humans were still fighting. Part 2. The Strategic Council had not convened in emergency session for 400 years. The last time had been during the campaign, when an unexpected solar event had disrupted communications across an entire sector. That crisis had been resolved in 6 hours. This crisis showed no signs of resolution. High Commander stood before the 7 members of the Strategic Council, projecting data from New Brisbane onto the massive display screens that lined the chamber walls. The council members, each representing one of the great houses of the hegemony, watched in silence as the numbers scrolled past. 140 hours of continuous combat, 23,000 casualties, 14,000 human casualties, and the humans were still fighting. "This is impossible," said Counselor, the eldest member of the council. "No species can sustain combat operations for this duration. The biology does not support it." "The biology does not support it," agreed, "and yet they continue." He activated a recording. The council watched as a human soldier, identified in captured records as a man named Thomas, defended a bridge crossing for 9 hours against repeated assaults. He had been awake for 120 hours. He had been shot 3 times. He had used every weapon available to him, from advanced projectile weapons to primitive explosives to a metal bar he had pulled from the bridge itself. When he finally fell, it was not because the had overwhelmed him. It was because his heart had stopped from exhaustion and blood loss. The medics estimated he had been technically dead for several minutes before his body acknowledged it. "He continued fighting after his heart stopped?" Counselor asked. "For approximately 3 minutes, yes. The human nervous system can operate briefly without conscious control. He killed 2 more soldiers during that period." The council fell silent. Analyst Prime was summoned to provide a detailed briefing. He was the hegemony's leading expert on human biology now, a title he had never wanted and deeply regretted. He stood before the council with his appendages tightly folded, a gesture of extreme discomfort. "Humans possess a biological stress response that they call the fight or flight mechanism," began. "When threatened, their bodies release chemicals including adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. These chemicals increase heart rate, enhance strength and speed, reduce sensitivity to pain, and sharpen focus. This is not unusual. Many species possess similar mechanisms." "Then what makes humans different?" Counselor asked. "What makes humans different is that they can sustain this response almost indefinitely. In most species, including our own, the stress response is limited. It activates in moments of danger and deactivates when the danger passes. The body forces rest and recovery. Humans have evolved the ability to override this limitation." Displayed a chemical diagram on the screens. The human brain contains structures that allow conscious control over the stress response. With sufficient motivation, a human can keep their body in a heightened state of combat readiness for days. The cost is extreme. Extended activation causes permanent damage to organs, particularly the heart and brain. It shortens. It creates psychological trauma, but humans are willing to pay this cost. "Willing to die in order to keep fighting?" another counselor asked. "Yes, humans have a concept they call sacrifice. It is considered noble to destroy oneself in service of a larger goal. Their history is filled with individuals who chose certain death rather than surrender. They build monuments to these individuals. They teach their children to admire them." The council absorbed this information in troubled silence. "There is more," continued. "Human combat effectiveness does not degrade in a linear fashion as exhaustion increases. In the early stages of exhaustion, yes, they become slower and less accurate. But if pushed far enough, something else happens. Their higher cognitive functions begin to shut down, and more primitive neurological systems take over. They become less intelligent but more dangerous. They stop processing fear. They stop feeling pain normally. They enter a state their soldiers call being in the zone, or the red zone." A new recording appeared on the screens. A human defender, a young woman with short dark hair, had been cornered in a damaged building. She had been awake for 130 hours. Her weapon was empty. 12 soldiers surrounded her. She killed 8 of them with her bare hands before the remaining 4 brought her down. Bare hands, Counselor said. She killed armored soldiers with her bare hands. Humans are physically weaker than soldiers under normal circumstances, confirmed. But in this state, they access strength reserves that would normally be locked away by their nervous system as a protective measure. They can tear muscles and break bones through the force of their own exertion. She shattered both her arms, killing those soldiers. She did not stop. The council members exchanged glances. These were beings who had conquered 17 species. They had seen countless forms of resistance. They had never seen anything like this. High Commander spoke again. Our intelligence division has been analyzing human historical records. What they have found is deeply concerning. The display screens changed to show a series of human conflicts throughout their history, narrated as the images scrolled past. Human civilizations have engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. They have developed increasingly sophisticated methods of killing each other. They have fought over territory, resources, ideology, religion, and in some cases, for no discernible reason at all. In one conflict, 2 human nations fought over a single stretch of mud for 4 years. The death toll exceeded 1 million soldiers. Neither side gained any meaningful territory. Neither side surrendered. In another conflict, a human nation was invaded by an overwhelming force. Rather than surrender, they burned their own cities and retreated into the wilderness. They continued fighting for years, suffering millions of casualties, until the invaders were forced to withdraw. The humans called this strategy scorched earth. They were willing to destroy everything they had to deny it to their enemies. Perhaps most concerning is a conflict that occurred in their recent history. 2 factions developed weapons capable of destroying their entire species. Rather than disarm, they pointed these weapons at each other for decades, each side prepared to destroy their entire world rather than accept defeat. Counselor raised an appendage. You are saying they would choose extinction over surrender? Yes, and they came close to doing exactly that on multiple occasions. The chamber fell silent. The implications were clear. Analyst spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. There is one more concept I must explain. Humans have a word that has no translation in our language. The closest approximation is spite. It refers to the act of causing harm to an enemy even when doing so provides no benefit to oneself, especially when doing so provides no benefit to oneself. I do not understand, Counselor said. A human who is defeated in combat may continue fighting specifically because their enemy wants them to stop. The act of resistance itself becomes the goal. They derive satisfaction from denying their enemy what they want, even if it costs them everything. That is not rational. No, agreed. It is not rational, but it is human. High Commander took control of the display screens again. Our current tactical situation is deteriorating. Human defenders have learned that soldiers require mandatory rest cycles every 30 hours. They have begun timing their attacks to coincide with these rest periods. They are denying our soldiers recovery time. They are grinding us down through attrition. The strategy we developed to defeat other species is being used against us. Can we not adjust our rotation schedules? A counselor asked. We have tried, but human observation is constant. They have scouts and surveillance systems watching our positions at all times. They know when we rest. They attack when we are vulnerable. What are our options? Displayed a tactical map. We have 3 options. First, we can commit additional forces. This would allow us to overwhelm the human defenders through sheer numbers. However, our projections suggest this would require the commitment of at least 10 additional legions, and casualties would remain high. Second, we can withdraw to orbit and conduct a bombardment campaign. This would destroy the human settlement entirely, eliminating the defenders. However, this approach has significant drawbacks. The humans have already begun dispersing into the surrounding wilderness. Even complete destruction of their settlement would leave survivors, and our records suggest humans are capable of sustaining guerrilla operations for decades or even centuries. Third, we can negotiate. This last option was met with shocked silence. The hegemony did not negotiate with conquered species. They had never needed to. Negotiate, Counselor said, as if the word tasted strange. With these animals. They are not animals, said quietly. They are something else entirely, something we have never encountered, and I do not believe we can defeat them through conventional means. The Strategic Council debated for many hours. In the end, they chose a fourth option that had not presented. They sent for reinforcements. 20 additional legions, nearly 600,000 soldiers, the largest military deployment in history. If the humans would not stop fighting, they would bury them in bodies. Part 3. 6 standard months had passed since the invasion of New Brisbane began. The hegemony had committed 600,000 soldiers to the conquest of a single human colony with a population of 200,000. By any reasonable calculation, the war should have ended in days. The war had not ended. High Commander stood before the Strategic Council once again. He looked older now, tired. The war had aged him in ways that centuries of conquest had not. Our current casualty count stands at 173,000, he reported. Human casualty estimates are approximately 92,000, including civilians. We are losing nearly 2 soldiers for every human killed, Counselor asked. Yes. That is unacceptable. I am aware. The tactical displays showed a map of New Brisbane that bore little resemblance to the one shown 6 months ago. The original human settlement was gone, reduced to ruins by bombardment. But the humans had not been in the settlement when it was destroyed. They had dispersed into the mountains and forests, establishing hidden bases and supply caches throughout the wilderness. Every attempt to locate and destroy these bases resulted in casualties. The humans had learned the terrain better than any scout. They appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. We control the skis, continued. We control the orbital space. We have complete technological superiority, and we are losing this war. He displayed a series of recordings. Supply convoys ambushed in mountain passes. Forward operating bases overrun at night. Soldiers killed by traps and explosives buried in the ground. The humans have a term for this type of warfare. They call it guerrilla tactics. Their historical records indicate they have refined these methods over thousands of years. They are extremely good at it. Then use orbital bombardment, a counselor suggested. Burn the forests, leave them nowhere to hide. We tried. The humans simply moved to areas we had not yet burned. When we burned those areas, they moved again. We have now destroyed approximately 60% of the habitable land on New Brisbane. The humans are still fighting. Where are they getting supplies, weapons, food? They are manufacturing weapons from salvaged materials. They are growing food in hidden locations. They are capturing our equipment and using it against us. One human unit has been operating exclusively with weapons for the past 2 months. They know our technology better than some of our own soldiers. Counselor's appendages twitched in frustration. This is one world, one colony. We rule an empire spanning 3 spiral arms. How can we not defeat 200,000 primitives? Because they will not stop, said simply. No matter what we do, no matter how many we kill, no matter how much we destroy, they will not stop. He displayed one final recording. It showed a human man, identified in captured records as someone called. He was old for a human, perhaps 60 years of age. He had been captured during a raid and was being interrogated. The interrogator asked him how long the humans planned to continue fighting. The old man smiled. His teeth were broken and stained with blood. He had been beaten badly. He should have been broken. My grandfather fought in a war, he said. Humans against humans, it lasted 6 years. He was just a child when it started. By the time it ended, he had lost his father, his mother, and 2 brothers. You know what he did after the war. The interrogator did not respond. He rebuilt. He had children. He taught them to be strong. He told them about the war so they would understand what humans could endure. And he told them that if anyone ever tried to destroy our people again, we would make them pay for every inch of ground and blood. The old man leaned forward, despite his injuries. I am that grandchild. My children are fighting out there right now. My are learning to fight. If you kill me, they will keep fighting. If you kill them, their children will keep fighting. We have been doing this for 10,000 years. We are very patient, and we do not forget. The recording ended. The Strategic Council sat in heavy silence. Withdraw, Counselor said finally. Call it a strategic repositioning. Salvage what dignity we can, but withdraw. The Council has never ordered a withdrawal, another counselor protested. In 12,000 years of conquest, we have never retreated. In 12,000 years of conquest, we have never encountered a species that cannot be broken. Would you prefer we continue throwing soldiers into this slaughter? How many more must die to preserve our pride? The debate continued for hours. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The would withdraw from New Brisbane. High Commander was tasked with overseeing the evacuation. It took 3 weeks to safely extract the remaining forces. The humans harassed them every step of the way, attacking supply lines and targeting officers. 12,000 more soldiers died during the withdrawal. When the last transport lifted off from New Brisbane, the humans emerged from hiding and gathered in the ruins of their settlement. There were fewer than 30,000 of them left. Their world was burned and broken. They had lost more than 80% of their population. They raised their weapons in salute as the enemy ships departed. Some cheered, some wept, some simply stood in silence, too exhausted to feel anything. They had won. High Commander filed his final report on the New Brisbane campaign. It was classified at the highest level, restricted to the Strategic Council and their successors. The document contained extensive tactical analysis and strategic recommendations. But the most important section was a simple warning, written in plain language so there could be no misunderstanding. The document stated that humanity could not be conquered through conventional military means. Their biology and psychology rendered standard doctrine ineffective. They did not have a shutdown trigger. They did not surrender. They did not stop. Any attempt to conquer human space would result in a prolonged war of attrition that the hegemony could not sustain. The recommended policy was complete avoidance of human territory. If conflict with humans became unavoidable, immediate negotiation was advised. Under no circumstances should forces engage in prolonged ground combat with human defenders. The report concluded with a personal observation from High Commander. He wrote that he had studied 17 species during his career. He had found weaknesses in all of them. He had exploited those weaknesses to achieve victory. Humans were different. Their weakness was their strength. Their fragile bodies drove them to compensate with determination. Their short made them willing to spend their lives freely. Their history of constant warfare had bred a species that was perfectly adapted for conflict. Humans did not fight to win, he wrote. They fought because fighting was what they were. They would fight until they won. They would fight until they lost. They would fight until nothing remained. And even then, their descendants would remember and wait and eventually fight again. The had conquered the galaxy by being patient and methodical. The humans were more patient. The humans were more stubborn. The humans had been fighting each other for 10,000 years and still had not stopped. The hegemony could not match that. No one could. 3 centuries passed. The hegemony remained the dominant power in the galaxy, but their expansion had stopped. They consolidated their existing territory and focused on internal development. They watched from a distance as humanity slowly spread across the stars, colonizing new worlds and building a civilization. When the Galactic Compact was formed, a coalition of species seeking peaceful cooperation, they surprised everyone by applying for membership. More surprisingly, they strongly advocated for human inclusion. Many species were confused by this. They had a reputation as conquerors, and the humans were relatively primitive newcomers to interstellar society. Why would the mighty hegemony support their membership? At the formal ceremony admitting humanity to the compact, the ambassador was asked this question directly. The ambassador was an elderly creature named III, a direct descendant of the High Commander who had led the invasion of New Brisbane. He had been raised on stories of that campaign. He had studied the classified reports. He understood what his ancestor had learned at such terrible cost. He looked at the human delegates who were smiling and shaking hands with representatives of a dozen species. They seemed friendly, cheerful even. One of them was laughing at a joke. They did not look dangerous. They looked soft and fragile and small. The ambassador had seen the recordings. He knew better. "We support human membership," he said carefully, "because we believe they will make valuable partners in maintaining galactic peace." "But your people fought a war with them," the questioner pressed. "You lost many soldiers." "Yes, we did." "And now you want them as allies." The ambassador was quiet for a moment. He watched the human delegates mingling with the crowd. One of them, a young woman with dark hair, reminded him of a figure from an old recording. A woman who had killed 8 soldiers with her bare hands after 130 hours without sleep. "Humans are the only species we have ever encountered who are more frightening as allies than as enemies," he said finally. "We would rather have them beside us than across from us. At least this way, they might eventually sleep." The questioner did not understand. Most species would not have understood. The ambassador did not try to explain. Across the room, the human delegates were celebrating their admission to the galactic community. They were talking about peace and cooperation and shared progress. They were making friends and building relationships. They were doing all the things that civilized species did. But the ambassador knew the truth. Somewhere deep inside every one of them was a fire that could not be extinguished, a capacity for violence and endurance that biological limitations, a willingness to suffer any cost and pay any price to achieve their goals. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the or the most advanced, but they were the most stubborn, the most relentless, the most determined. And they had learned, at the cost of nearly 200,000 soldiers, that those qualities mattered more than strength or intelligence or technology. The war for New Brisbane had lasted 6 months. The humans had been prepared to fight for 600 years. They had not won a single war since, not because they could not, but because they no longer tried. Some enemies were not worth making. The ambassador raised his drinking vessel in a toast to the new human members of the compact. The humans returned the gesture, smiling their friendly smiles. The ambassador smiled back and tried not to think about what those soft, fragile hands could do when their owners decided not to stop.